Welcome to the Reality Therapy Podcast, where the truth will set you free.
Welcome to the Reality Therapy Podcast. We've got a great panel today, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves, starting with Danielle.
Hello, I'm Danielle. I'm based out of Arizona and I'm an LPC.
Kathleen?
I'm Kathleen Mills, Texas, LPCS, and I'm a certified employee assistance professional.
Brant?
Hi, I'm Brant. I am actually also out of Arizona. I'm not a licensed clinician. I have a master's in social organizational psychology. Was that it? Did I hit the high points?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay.
Michelle?
Hi, I'm Michelle. I work in Illinois. I'm an LCSW.
Oh, nice. Dr. Gradi?
Hey, what's up? I'm Dr. Gradi, Shari. I am a licensed clinical professional counselor. That's what they call us in Kansas. So I'm out of Kansas, but yeah, own private practice here. So
Cool. So yeah, I've done a couple of these panels so far and getting a variety of people, mostly on the clinical side, but like Brant, I think is interesting to get that perspective on is it industrial organizational?
Social organizational psychology, which is slightly different, a little bit less assessment based, a little bit more around like group dynamics and unconscious roles of developing groups.
Interesting to have that perspective join us as well. And most of the people have been conservative, although some have said, I'm a classical liberal, I'm a libertarian, I'm moderate, I'm apolitical. But I think what kind of joins all of us together on these panels is being fairly heterodox in a pretty monolithic field, being not far left wing. And so I want to start off by, what do you notice in the field of social work, therapy, psychology around political bias?
Well, I can speak for myself. What's been happening to us lately is it's not only in the academia, postgraduate workplace, it's now elevated itself into corporations. And we do a large volume of employee assistance program work here in our group practice, and we serve many EAPs. And one of a very large EAP decided to cancel us because they didn't like our website, due to not being diverse enough. So it's not just at the ground roots. It's now worked its way all the way up in our field, in the corporate EAP industry.
Was that this year?
October 31st was the termination date.
Wow.
So I'm not going to let it go. I'm reviewing my options, and so we shall see.
it feels to me like what is actually going on in society and a lot of the Facebook groups, that I used to be a part of that I'm no longer a part of, or some of them I am, but is they think that that's the majority of patients reaching out looking for help. And the reality is I've established myself as a faith-based counselor. That's from the lens primarily from which I operate. And politics are mostly out of the room, but it's interesting when you put them in the room or they just stumble into the room. It's way more conservative than what society would lead you to believe, or some of these, Facebook groups would lead you to believe. So, and people probably intentionally reach out to me because I have that local reputation for being a conservative or faith-based counselor, and I'm fine with that. It does its own screening of individuals that probably don't belong.
I run a group practice as well. And so if I like to say that we're a well-kept secret, right? If you know, you know, because so many of our clients are word of mouth. We specialize in play therapy and attachment. And so we don't promote ourselves, but we're all Christian. We don't market ourselves as that because we don't want to limit people getting help. But people talk, right? People know where we stand. Not so much colleagues, right? Not so much other therapists, because it can be a little scary. But what matters is my clients really the most. So
Yeah. I'm also in private practice. And I just set up my own private practice last year. But
Yay!
like, thank you. Carried over some clients from a very vocally, um, I guess, progressive group practice. And I guess what I found on more like the micro level is people, and some of it's my area. Um, I'm not in Chicago, but I'm in a very blue part of Illinois. And people assume that since I'm a therapist in this area, I share their beliefs. And I don't know. I have some people, like you were saying about word of mouth, like I do have some people that they know, and they definitely show up differently and more comfortably, I would say. Yeah, it's interesting, I guess, to me to hear other practices can like set up that reputation because it's I want to get there somehow. I don't know how to in this area because there's a lot of threats about like we're gonna report you, um, gonna get your license revoked, things like that. Don't know how substantiated they could be, but makes you stop and think.
It does. Maybe worst case scenario, I've had to go down some of the same paths myself. Like worst case scenario, I get my license revoked. I'm like, wait, then I wouldn't have to do CEUs, and I I could be totally cash based. Like, it's
Well,
like maybe that doesn't sound that terrible. I mean, it does kind of sacrifice some other things here at the group practice that I run, um, primarily for my pre-licensed clinicians. But
yeah.
um, I'm fairly certain that you know I would be taken care of one way or the other. So, but yeah, it's a terrifying thing. Especially if your income is what your family relies on. Yeah.
Yeah.
I always encourage people, therapists, to not be intimidated by the idea that somebody is threatening your license because of something that you believe. If you if you study the rules in your state and the state statutes that go along with it, at least here in Texas, I can't lose my license because somebody doesn't like what I have on my website. What's really interesting is that the accusations by the left is very ill. What would you call it? They have no idea who we see. Zero. And for them to make that leap of assumptions based on what our website is all about is insidiously, horribly gone awry. And there's going to be consequences with that when somebody assumes that you don't see diverse people in your practice. They have, again, no idea. So for you to be threatened that you're going to lose your license and somebody's going to report you to your board, I always make the connection of like, you need to know your licensing board. You need to know your rules inside and out more than you ever wanted to. And then what violation of the rules would there possibly be a complaint against? And then the board, if they have a penalty matrix and sanctions, there's none here in Texas that I can lose my license because of what I profess to believe, faith-based or whatever. Can't
Brant,
happen.
yeah, I think,
Brant,
well, Kathleen, I'll say, again, not a therapist here, but I think that the valid fear is that these large organizations aren't going to play by their own rules, and that there is going to be, I mean, that's like really what it comes down to for a lot of folks, I think, is that, yeah, by the letter of the law or by the spirit of the law as it was written, these regulations should be protecting these things. And I mean, my mind goes to like Daniel Penny and people who have been put in awful life upturning situations when they are practicing just what has always been basic American self-defense, or citizens stepping in, for example. So I think the real risk is that you're going to be dealing with people in power who are playing dirty to push their political agenda and are trying to hurt you as a statement, and to garner, virtue tokens or whatever. In the larger picture, and again, I try to have this group and larger, kind of like this group psyche lens. I think a lot about groups and how unconscious roles develop and how these trends get acted out. I think, when the woke stuff was really hitting, I was running a nonprofit, and then I switched over and was directing a men's dual diagnosis recovery center. And to me, the folks that are in both of those worlds, doing giving work and doing helping work, are trained, probably have a propensity for really believing in this idea of empathy as an important high principle in the work. And we've been taught or conditioned to, not all of us, but not necessarily have appropriate boundaries around understanding empathy versus sympathy, for example. And, when you are in a situation where you don't have a finely honed grasp on the balance between boundaries and empathy, and often how boundaries are empathy, like a hard decision now makes for a better relationship for both parties in the future. It's easy to go for that like cheap empathy, which often means catering to these progressive ideas, right? And so, I think a lot about like the delineation between like nice versus kind, and I think a lot of people in the field they don't understand the idea of the value of a hard truth being told with blunt honesty. And so, if you've created a huge population of people that believe they're helping by being nice all the time, they walk right into this hyper liberal agenda. Like communism, Marxism sounds really good to a young person who hasn't experienced life and who believes that empathy is like, and niceness is the highest ideal to strive to. And that's a huge problem. And I think we've hit on that. And we've allowed that to kind of like enter into the system for years and years and years, and to compound until now we have to have these, speakeasy panels of like reasonable minded people. Thanks for hosting, Ryan.
Yeah. I think that gets into an interesting topic of there's this general idea amongst progressives, specifically amongst mainstream in therapy and psychology, that this liberal idea of niceness, this kind of knee-jerk niceness, is like always the appropriate way to go about things, the appropriate lens to see the world. I think that's what we're seeing in like gender-affirming care for minors. And just to name one example of like, this person is suffering, I need to give them what they want so that they stop suffering, as opposed to like a more rational compassion of like, what's actually going to help this person. Do you feel like your version of kindness is like not accepted? Is the kind of the question I'm asking.
Can I answer that real quick?
Yeah.
Certainly. It's I think it's counterintuitive for a lot of people that, weirdly, actually, I think a lot of folks that have gone through recovery and have committed to either a STEPS program or something, whatever it has been that has stuck, they've had to learn about accountability and like the value of a hard truth. There's like no way to not grasp that concept and to be successful in recovery, in my opinion. When I was a field director for a wilderness therapy company, this just example popped out. I was driving a staff team out of the woods after a shift, and the senior staff, this drove me nuts. It blew my mind actually that I was watching him coach younger, greener staff on how to interact with clients. And I don't even remember what the actual situation was, but what he was saying is that he was giving them this talk about how you have your rapport that you build up by saying like these nice things and getting these moments of like shared enjoyment, or like whatever. Oh, I like that rapper too. And then when it's time to hold a boundary, you have to reach into your piggy bank of rapport to and withdraw. And that's the currency that you use to hold boundaries. And I was like, holy shit, dude, your boundaries are going to be how you build a trusting relationship. Like that is such an inverse way of thinking about it to me. The best relationships and the deepest, most trusting relationships often, in my opinion, have come from those times where as a staff, you would come in and before there's any rapport, you start with like holding, kindly and respectfully, but holding some firm boundaries and not being pushed off of something by, these teenagers, clients, like they know that if they can see the like need to be nice in certain people, and they'll like manipulate and play that game. And I was just like watching. I was like, well, that's like systemic infection of these bad ideas right here. You have like a senior staff coaching newer staff on these ideas, and so like I try to nip that in the bud, and that is a good kernel of like that bad concept of empathy, in my opinion. Like the suicidal empathy for GADSAT is like really a popular phrase right now. I'm not quite talking about that, but just this like twisted, shadowy version of empathy that's like sick niceness that's really not about building a relationship built on trust and integrity, and is more about just like starting to exchange favors with people. Rant over.
Yeah, so my practice has been growing, and I think one of the hardest things is trying to hire people with like-minded values. And I made the job description very much not like we don't affirm, right? Because that sounds bad, but we are direct. We're here to challenge these thoughts because we're all trauma-based. We're all EMDR. And so we're coming from the past experiences have influenced your current thoughts, feelings, and actions now. Right? So let's dive into the trauma. Let's do the hard work. Let's find the reason why that we're experiencing the now. And so, yeah, it's very much, I've heard of practices. We just affirm everything. We sit with them. We empathize. Well, then where's the growth, right? I tell all my clients the goal of therapy is to get out of therapy. I do not want you here forever. I want you to put me out of a job. That's how it should be. Right? I don't want this to be a hobby. I don't want this to be maintenance. I want you to feel like you can take the tools from me and then go and then be successful. And then know that when something else happens in life, you now have tools and you don't have to come back.
I
Right?
love that so much, Danielle. I keep asking myself, like, if the client has all the answers and all they need me to do is validate them, like, why are they paying me? You know?
That's when we
Ryan,
help
it's
them
called
find
rent a
friends.
friend.
Rent a friend. Oh,
Mhm.
you have no audio, Brant.
I was going to say, what you just described is the type of therapy, in quotes, that could be replaced by AI.
Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Michelle?
So I'm kind of, I don't know the exact laws in like Texas, but in Illinois, if I have somebody that comes to me and wants to change genders, and I start asking them questions about why and trauma, and they don't like that, they could sue me. So I actually just recently experienced this where I referred them to another therapist, and the therapist immediately was like, "Yes, let's start you on puberty blockers and things like that." I know, it's so bad. And and then the other therapists in my community that I've actually worked at the same practice that they're at, and I'm now seeing, I work with families too, and so I'm now seeing a family that like this therapist has basically told this teenager, well, it's impossible to bully your parents. So you're not in the wrong at all in any of this. And I can't, it's like my hands are like tied because I can't undo that because there's so much rapport, but it comes from this kind of niceness that we're talking about of, well, my kids' feelings always need validated, and if they don't feel validated, then I have definitely done something wrong and I'm a bad parent. And it's not that my teen needs to be responsible for some of their own reactions too. We just have to be this nice kind of, yeah, no challenge. But it makes therapy hard in my area. In some situations where, like with families, where they have other therapists that they're seeing, and it's very, very different values and just inaccurate.
Well, that whole thing, I'm sorry to say, I mean, in my personal opinion, is about poor parenting and being the hovercraft parent and not giving your child the appropriate consequences, natural consequences that occur when my child makes a bad mistake. Parents are mortified that they have to do that now. With that idea, though, We have seen states and school districts override parents' power to parent. And so the parents are now afraid that their kids will be taken away. I mean, look what's happening in California and also and so forth and so on. And Michelle, in direct uh, comment to you about what you just said, please be looking at the Chavez case that was presented to the Supreme Court about 2 months ago, October 7th, I believe. That is going to be a key
Yes.
decision, no
Yes.
question. And then there's also the state of Virginia, whose two LPCs sued their licensing board, and they won. So they could have the conversation that we have been told we can't have as it pertains to gender affirming care.
Mhm.
We know the horrific effects of gender affirming care brings.
Yeah.
And that is a very sad state when grad schools are promoting this left and right.
I think the hard thing for any of us in this field is like we didn't really go into it for the money. We went into it just because we love people and care about people. And when truthful conversations about objective reality are challenged and dismissed, and in fact, the opposite becomes true, you're left with really hard decisions as a practitioner. It's like, does my love for people and for this kid potentially sitting in front of me, um, does it mean that I double down and dig my heels in and do the right thing by the child and by God and by humanity? Um, or do I refer them out and just say, you know what? I'm not running the risk of myself getting sued. I think as a practice owner too, every decision that I make for myself and for one patient, I make for every patient that comes through these doors. And so there's also that. I think just like Kathleen's talking about, is it, you know, as you've got upcoming interns that are attending grad school now, it's like the twilight zone. All three of my degrees are from faith-based institutions for a reason. But still, it's still leaking into some of those institutions. And, I get the interns in here and, they think that private practice is, I really affirm this stuff. I'm like, hold on. If you want to do that, wait until you graduate and go start your own private practice, and you get some malpractice insurance that will hopefully cover any errors you might make in that regard. But this can't happen under the roof of my company because that's not the foundation on which I established it. And so that's kind of a long-winded way. My grandpa was a Baptist preacher, so you get what you get, but a long-winded way of saying it's just a lot of trapped feelings and a lot of feeling like you're always on this fence and always having to straddle a line of what is right by the person that you really care about, which is your patient, and then like what's right by society and right by the rest of your practice, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm thankful. I teach at a faith-based university. I teach in the undergrad program, and I'm so thankful because I would not thrive at any other type of university because I can be as overt and conservative and Christian as I want to be, and um, a lot of them grew up in this like Christian bubble, which isn't a bad thing, right? But also helping them know that you're going to go work in the secular field, what's coming, because these students have no idea, right, what we have been going through in the field like really, because I started in the field in 2018, and so I was in my practice, and then COVID, right? So no, I don't have as much experience as some of us, but just trying to prepare these students. And we do have a master's program, and so I tell them, I'm like, if you're thinking about counseling, do our program, please, because then you can serve like serve non-believers but still hold to your biblical roots, right? And still know your ethics behind it, and still, right, glorify the Lord through your actions. Because yeah, there's just, again, so many universities that are just leaning the other way. I'm in a doctorate program, and I had to write a paper on a marginalized community or something, and I chose marginalized community with a like hot controversial topic. So I did abortion and how that impacts men. And my
Ooh.
professor was like, I don't know how you're gonna do this, because I had to get approval. And she's like, I don't get it. Like, how would this impact men? And I'm just thinking to myself, how is it that hard to think about
Right.
that?
This brings up something that I think is really crucial that I think gets missed a lot, and it's a theory of mind issue. I think I've talked about this with you, Brant.
Yeah, sounds
You
like
know,
it.
like the whole like marketing yourself as a progressive, where like I'm the king or queen of empathy, but like complete inability to imagine another person's perspective who's not a progressive like you. Like I can't even imagine what like you could possibly be thinking about that abortion paper, because it's impossible for me to put myself in your shoes. Like, do you feel like that when you're in this field?
Yeah, well, I think somebody mentioned it already. Just it's a well-known phenomenon in my circles, at least, that if when you're in a professional environment, um, I've run into plenty of hyper liberal, very vocal people who the insane assumption is that you share all of their crazy beliefs, unquestionably, and so like that was one of the most, looking back when I was in more like leadership organizations with corporate environments and actual like directorship roles with centers and things like that, the boldness and brazenness around like just dropping these hyper liberal ideas as if they're fact. And everyone who's conservative in the room, because you start to, if you've been at a company for a while, you kind of know who your people are, who you can like have real conversations with. Just kind of has to go with it, and you get like steamrolled. And there's no, the theory of mind is basically like, well, if you support conservative things, you're a monster. Like you are, you're a vile, deplorable, and I can't even imagine that somebody like that would be in the room with me in a helping profession. And so, I feel emboldened to say things, not me, but the hypothetical, like hyper liberal is emboldened to say things like, oh, well, of course we're all wanting to affirm the gender here. Of course we want to not question blah, blah, and just like slide these presumptions in. That's been my experience for sure.
I think it exists too, just within the patient realm too. I reflect back to one patient I saw for, I don't know, 6 years or so. Um, and I've been in the field probably longer than you've been alive, Ryan, like 25 years, almost 26 years. So like one of my patients is like, coming in for 6 years, and I don't remember what she said, but one day it was comments about liberal this and that, and like, do you believe these conservatives, and da 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 da. And she knew well my history, that my first 12 years of life out of school, bachelor's level, were working social work in the urban core here in Kansas City. And so she's going on and on and on about all these conservative this, and then at the end I was just sitting there and I was like, I'm conservative. And she was like, what? And I said, well, why are you surprised? And she goes, well, you like actually care about people, and you care about social welfare and marginalized communities and women and women's rights and advocating for abused kids. And I'm like, uh-huh. But and that's the problem, is like 20 years ago, you could sit down and just openly talk amongst yourselves back and forth about ideologies and how they differ. And, oh, you believe this about immigration, and that's worrisome to you. I can totally understand how you would feel that way. I would be scared too. Here's why I think this. And it would just be a mutually um, inclusive conversation. But I think that there's this third party in the room, which is social media, that has got both sides putting the other as the enemy. And it's going so far as like, you want to kill my grandma, or you want to kill so and so, and it's like, do we really believe that? Like, because when you sit down and talk to me face to face, and you know my life and what I've put my career into, I don't hate anybody. I've given people money out of my last $40 out of my own pocket to make sure their kids were fed. Is this hating people that? So it's just, but that's we can't deny the existence of this third party that's generating a lot of the tension and dissension. Guess I know that I didn't mean to go that way, but
I want to build off of that a little bit, because I feel like there's this huge mentality in our field, in psychology, therapy, social work, that you could never be a conservative therapist. Like, that's just
Yeah.
that's almost like an oxymoron to them. And then you ask them to explain it. It's like, well, I mean, our field involves caring about people, but and then they have this cartoonish caricature of some psychotic, racist sociopath, and that's why you couldn't be a conservative therapist. How do you push back against that narrative?
me personally, I think every single one of my patients knows, and this is going to sound a little crazy, and I don't care. I'm just in the I don't care club about this issue. Every single one of my patients knows I love and care about them. Period. Because I really do believe, God made us with this innate need to be connected. And, the way that the world goes, and with COVID, we end up being a tool for connection. And I saw that personally evolve during COVID. Um, so my patients know they should, and I think that they do. I love and care about them. My teens, because I work with just pick like a selective, my doctoral research was on teen suicide. And so I work with a few selected, highly suicidal young women. They're allowed to text me or call me at any time. I will pick up my phone at any time. I will text them. I will send them memes. I'll send them words of encouragement. I will send them TikToks. They send them back to me. My adults, it's a little bit different of a boundary, obviously, but I'm curious to know, hey, when you have your gender reveal, please tell me what your baby's going to be. Please don't, come in here at the next session and let me know then. I'm genuinely interested in your life. And kind of like Brant was talking about, I think when you build that piggy bank of currency as connection, you have the right to say, hey, I love you enough to tell you the truth. And I care about you enough to risk my own best interest in some regard. I mean, if we're getting to that, to tell you the truth and to make sure you live a fulfilling, authentic life. So there's that. I've worked with transgender patients before, and I don't love them any less than anybody else, because that's against my own philosophy as a human being. Um, so that's like, kind of, he's talking about the piggy bank deposits. Mine is like, I love and I care about my people, and that facilitates the most change and growth and understanding, I think, in both directions.
I think the thing that helps me the most, and I know this is going to sound a little bit weird, is that I have decided that the counseling field has been captured, um, and it's become a cult programming type of field. So I think this is what you're seeing, is you're seeing these therapists or whoever they are in a transhumanism kind of way, roboting and parroting what they've been programmed to say and how to respond. So when I think about it that way, it helps me keep focused on exactly what Shari was just talking about. I'm not going to I'm going to love all my patients the same way. I'm going to have good conversations with them. I look at them in terms of there's a soul there. Now, what they've decided to do with their lives, that's why they're here. And we're going to try to figure this out. And I'm partnering with them. Unfortunately, the counseling field, since it's been captured, includes all of us here on this podcast. And people are beginning to figure this out, that the counseling field is affirming what I'm trying to not affirm with fill in the blank. I'm trying to get some answers here. So it's making the people who have not been captured by the cult and the thinking that goes with it. It's the religion. It's the satanic religious kind of thing that is happening in grad school right now. And that's why it's really hard to be a supervisor with some of these young associates, and Shari's exactly right. But it helps me look at my field as we're all in trouble. And so I know what I'm going to do, and I'm going to have to beef up my website, et cetera, to help regain the trust for us to stand out. And we're different. And this is why we're here. We're waiting for you. And oddly enough, the people that are now coming into our office, we always ask them, how did you find us? All that kind of stuff. And they actually say, your website spoke to me. I've been looking for you. Where have you been? That's profound, y'all. So we're all in this cult, whether you believe it or not, because of the captured environment that we are living in. And so I think we need to stand out and be more compassionate and human and connecting through, I'm going to use social media, okay, in that way, because that's the only counter I have, honestly. And I'm not going to lay down when somebody cancels a contract when it's not even in the contract because they don't like something that I said on my website. So I'm not afraid of these people. I'm just not. And I'm encouraging everybody who's on this podcast today, don't be intimidated. There's no reason. This is a cult you're dealing with. They're not going to get out of the box. And our people are looking for us.
Mm-hmm. Kathleen, I like what you're saying, and I'm definitely. I realize that I offered another perspective earlier, and I'm going to do it again. But it just, I am scared of these people.
Okay.
I'm scared of, like, one of the ways that I get steered, and my context right now, I feel a little bit more free to kind of say whatever the hell I want because I'm not working under an organization. I don't have a boss that, or a licensing board that can take something from me. But this is a topic that you'll see in the Twitter sphere discussed by some pretty toxic people. And then also there's some, I think, real discussion to be had around this is like the role of women in my life. Specifically, I recently had an experience with a really close friend of mine, and his wife, who's also a friend, who she's got other friends that are like very, very liberal. Like, we're all coming from this field of mental health. That's like how we all met. And so there's, it's all like this meshy web and interconnections. And so we've had, this would be the second time I've had somebody who, is somehow sort of soft writing me off or kind of pushing away, in a pretty passive way without even telling me directly until I like really dig. And like affecting my social connections, right? And like there's like real loss there. Like one of the, I'm trying to think how much is like helpful to get into, but like there's no escaping the influence and the power that this capture has. I think it's a real threat. It can actually hurt people. It does hurt people. I see it as dangerous. I am scared of it. I think it's important to speak out, but I don't think it's like, how do we work with this, right? Like a Harvard professor recently, I think Ryan, you might have seen my post on it, was talking about how they felt ashamed that they hadn't spoken out during some of the COVID craziness and all that. And it's like,
yeah, it was Malcolm Gladwell, wasn't it?
Well, there's him. He said that.
Oh, it was different.
This person's name was Lepore, and
it
is. We are rediscovering. This has all been done before, right? With the Bolsheviks and World War II stuff. The immense power of like societal level groupthink and how we have this idea of the American dream, which is like really based in independence and self-sustaining, yada, 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 which is like, unfortunately, largely a fantasy. Like, we're all at the best interdependent with each other. And the fact that One of my, close friends' wives can be intensely triggered by. I mean, the last time I saw her was like right after Charlie Kirk's assassination. I was probably on a hot one, and I can understand how that might be challenging for certain people or whatever. But you know, like how much am I willing to endure around that? Because I have needs for connection, and I don't even have my income tied into it. I can understand why people just shut their mouths and like let this stuff continue. Which also validates it. And last thing, Ryan, we forgot to do our land acknowledgement before we started the podcast.
I saw someone put that in their Zoom thing before. It was their name, their pronouns, and then like on the land of this tribe in their Zoom name.
Yeah, I was obviously joking about that last piece, but no, I think there's a real reason to be fearful. And that's like a human thing. Like I love the idea of like, I'm not scared. And I admire people that can like legitimately step into that. On the best of days, I can step into that. But the reality is I'm okay with saying like that stuff scares me at times.
Yep.
I'm fearful.
Well, I mean, I don't know about you guys, and I don't ever force my religion on anybody or my spirituality on anybody, but I know that when I was born that this was the job that God made me to do. And he like uploaded all this hardware and software and said, you need to go do this. And this is a career I prayed many, many years about doing. And, I've been canceled here in the metro. I've been kicked out of Facebook groups. And, I single parent 2 sons. One's in college now playing football. So he's kind of on his own ish, making his NIL money. But I still have one at home. And, I think the constant in my life has been that God has always taken care of me and my sons, always. And he put me here. He guided me here. I do trust and I have a peace in my heart that I will be here as long as he lets me be, and that has his hedge of protection around me, and that if it ever gets to the point where I need to go, that will be clearly outlined and clearly, obvious and visible, and that my kids will have another, like, he is the one that's taking care of my sons. And so I just lean back into that. But I'm also human, Brant, and there are times where I'm like, oh, have I done X, Y, and Z right? Did I say the right thing? Have I done the right thing by this company? And um you go through a lot of those internal struggles in your mind, and it's back for me going back to my faith and my spirituality, and God's always like, I got you. I got you. I keep saying this over and over. I got you. Keep doing what you're doing. I'm going to let you raise your kids. And it's a very fortunate experience. Because I don't know that many women could do it, and without the help of their dad. And so I'm very, very grateful, and I always give God the glory and the credit for what he's enabled me to do. When it's time to go, he'll let me know. And that's how I have peace. Because I can't be up all night worrying, I can't.
Brant, I'm really in agreement with what you said. I don't mean to discount that there is a real fear here. However, it's, I'm at my point in my career where I really don't care. I'm going to go through that fear, and I'm going to fight for what I'm going to do. And I just think we're all on different levels, and we all are serving a good purpose for the good. You only need a few people that are willing to be at the front, to lead the charge, if you will. I just think of Braveheart, right? So, you don't have to be brave, uh, you know, it just takes a leader or a couple strategic, and then who's got your back behind you. So that really has helped me a bunch. So I don't want to discount that. Yeah, I'm concerned, but here's where I am with all this. We are winning the war here. We are winning this spiritual warfare. Just because things look like they're full press court at this point. And so I think that's what I'm seeing is it's fully, they are in the corner and they're going to it's going to get worse before it gets better. But I'm telling you, we are winning. If you look at all the Supreme Court stuff, if you look at legal things, if you look at all the legal firms in this country who are fighting for our rights and quashing this, and if you look at the states that are now pivoting on the other end of the spectrum, let that help you. We've got a long ways to go, no doubt. And I am watching behind me, right? So I don't think I'm being dumb, but I've had it. And so I'm just going to go to the next level. So I really appreciate what you're saying, Brant, because you're absolutely right.
So I want to shift gears for a second. One of the things you hear from the mainstream progressive therapy complex is conservatives can't be therapists because they don't have like multicultural competencies. So like as a conservative, you could never work with a racial minority or a gay client or something like that. And I think judging from my experience in grad school, we talk a lot about multiculturalism. So if you talk about like an Afro Latinx non-binary client who's in a throuple, like we've talked about that, a number of times. Well, I don't know that we'd be qualified to help them, but we certainly talked about that. For my marriage and family counseling class, we had to read The Ethical Slut, which is all about polyamory. But I don't know that they're training us at all to handle a normal heterosexual relationship with traditional gender roles. Like we would have no clue how to handle that. You're definitely prepared to hold space for someone who's mourning the fact that Donald Trump is president, but not somebody who might be dealing with grieving the loss of Charlie Kirk and that assassination, right? So how do you think as a conservative you can bring in some multicultural competencies that are missed by the mainstream of the field?
I want to challenge the basic assumption real quick.
Yeah.
So I think that is the narrative that we in the field are fed. I do not think that most people are trained effectively to sit through this work with multiculturalism or whatever, however you want to say it. I think that the basic tenets of good therapy are grounded in the Enlightenment, certain pieces of Stoicism, a lot of like the CBT principles. Like again, not a therapist here, but I think that what is taught and passed for therapy is like this permissiveness and like a bastardization of Carl Rogers' ideas. And so, no, I don't think that the type of training that is hyperfixated on like, enabling and encouraging victim style thinking, right? I don't think that is I think there's a template that the institutions have shied away from teaching as much that is really the realm of effective therapy. And so, no, I just disagree that newer therapists are better able to work with marginalized or whatever, like whoever is at the top of the marginalization Olympics pedestal. I don't think that I think what's required to work with any population well is like a whole field that is aligned on like best practices, because it is a problem. I think, Shari, you had mentioned that, if you're holding boundaries and not necessarily being permissive around certain delusions or whatever, and then go down the street and get like a pat on the back and like just what their brand of empathy, then it like corrupts the kind of system and it ends up moving that way. I'm getting on a little bit of a rant, but just that idea that brand of toxic, permissive empathy is somehow like working more effectively with those clients. I don't agree with that.
To clarify my point, talking about something a lot and having good training in it are two different things.
No, I know you aren't. I know we're probably in alignment there, but just the institutional narrative is that they're training people effectively to work with marginalized populations. I think they're doing the opposite. Is kind of my point.
And I want to add, like, not all I feel like that's stereotyping clients, right? Like, I've had clients that are not white, and when we talk about, because I think it's still important, like, let me understand your family culture. What are some beliefs that you have? They're not all left. I've definitely had people who aren't white that are conservative, right? And so I feel like having these trainings specifically for different cultures. I think it's good for knowledge and whatnot, but we also shouldn't be putting people in a box, right? So of course I ask about it because I'm not MFT, but I do play therapy in a parent-child attachment. And so yes, I need to know about like different cultural piece, what's important and what's not. But I'm not going to assume anything because I think that's racist to assume,
Yeah.
make those assumptions about someone based on how they look.
Not if you're in the cult, Danielle. If you're in the cult, what I say goes, right?
Yeah.
And that's how this cultish type of whatever you want a profession, that's where it's going. And it's very
Yeah.
nefarious.
Mhm.
So you put those two together and then you go down that rabbit hole and it's not good.
Yeah. I teach my students to look at the person through the context of their whole world, right? Because I teach one of my dogs just got out. I apologize if they're scratching on the door. From Bruce Perry's Boy Who's Raised as a Dog. I don't know if anybody's read that. Wonderful book. But he looks at every single thing in his cases. He's looking through the biopsychosocial lens, not just the one culture piece. Like, it's absolutely everything. And that's how we should be looking. So not neglecting it because it's a part of you. And it's not your only part of you, right?
Well, to your point, Danielle, we're basically taking denotative meanings of words and we're making them our subjective connotative meaning. So what used to be racist, like I can't say, hey, hand me that black phone charger. Oh, mom, you're being racist. And they tease me because that's how it goes in the school. You can't say even if you're talking about an inanimate object, if it's not the color of your skin, you are being racist. And I've taught my kids better than that and they're smarter than that. But we just keep moving the bar on things, which is what this movement does. We took the bar from, we don't call abortion what it is, because if we called it murder, it would not be easily stomached. So we're switching. We like to reassign value and a word to something that it isn't, so we can keep passing it through and get people to bend and obey. So
Yeah,
I
keep
think that's where a lot of. Oh, sorry, Michelle.
No, I was just agreeing with you. You have to change it to keep affirming it.
Well,
Well, the
Right.
definitions are being hijacked and redefined.
right.
And when you
Yeah.
see that, then it's not going to go anywhere good. The original the original meaning of words have absolutely been altered by design with intent. And that's to keep the cult intact.
You know what else? I know this is a whole nother rabbit's or whatever Pandora's box to open, but I think the unintended consequence of that now makes very much sense that we're seeing it happen is that as we effectively strip the meaning of those words, it empowers this like toxic germ of actual, I won't even want to call it far right, but just like open bigotry, misogynistic, hateful rhetoric that now is coming from. And so if you've stripped the meaning of the word of racism, of bigotry, of Nazism, whatever it is, then now we're seeing the same apathy that the conservatives and centrists have adopted, rightfully so. It's like, oh, these words don't mean anything anymore. I don't care if you call me a racist. If we strip away the meaning of those words, we're seeing that like being used as this defense around pretty horrible ideas that are trying to like slide in from like the Nick Fuentes stuff around open hatred of groups based on immutable characteristics, which I absolutely do not agree with. But I've seen conservative influencers be like, oh, you guys are calling them racist now. It's like, well, we're talking about people that are openly acknowledging that they're whatever team Hitler is, like Nick Fuentes. I haven't watched a bunch of his stuff, so I'm like pulling mostly clips around it, but it's like pretty abhorrent ideology from what I can tell. And the fact that they've Kathleen, as you said, stripped the meaning and cried wolf so many times, it's now difficult to have an immune system to that type of hateful rhetoric in our own party.
That's when you can get emboldened, Brant, because they keep moving it, like Shari said. So that the jig is up. We're on to you now. And I'm not going to tolerate this anymore because this is insane, because it is.
Ryan,
You got
I've got
anything,
a
Michelle?
peace out.
Oh,
I've got a noon. So
all right.
I've
Thank you for
oh,
joining us.
yeah, it's been really good. Let me know about next time.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
All right, keep fighting the good fight.
Will do.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Michelle, you got anything?
I was actually, I mean, that's a good rabbit trail, Brant, but I was going to go backwards a little bit. I think in the whole like woke narrative, what we've lost in the therapy field is the ability to be with. We're not being trained to be with. We're being trained to be, well, I know so much about your culture. I know how you feel. You don't feel that? Are you sure you don't feel that? You know, this whole kind of thing where I can no longer look at the person in the context of how they really show up because I have so much crap being fed to me about how they must feel because I have to be this understanding person that it fogs it and you can no longer be with the person how they actually are.
I
And
have something to jump off of that. I'm not the guy to, knee jerk in the direction of wokeness. Like I wrote 6 books on how bad wokeness is. Like I think I'd like to think I have an idea for like, that's not the way to do things. But a few months ago, I was working with an African-American client and he's telling me a story. And part of the story involves someone calling him a racist name. And so when he finished talking, I jumped on that point. And he's like, no, you missed the point of my story. Like I was so focused on, I have to address the racism in this story. He's like, no, that wasn't even the point of the story I was telling you. So like, even me who's like dug into this and, debunked like the woke, I still
Yeah.
fall into that trap sometimes.
yeah,
That's
I see that with teen clients that I have where they'll be like, yeah, these friends, they say these words and we call each other that. It's not that big of a deal. And it it's hard to be like, oh, what is that? Like, to not be like, oh, what is that like? And actually see what is their story that they're actually trying to tell me.
That's what this, I think,
Mhm.
illustrates this point that I probably made with you before, Ryan. There's that movie with, I forget his name, but Scarlett Johansson. It's called like Marriage Story or something.
Kylo Ren.
Yeah, Kylo Ren. Yeah, we've had this talk. I think
Yeah.
this is exactly how it started. Is you haven't done.
Yeah.
But like Donald Driver, no, Ben Driver, Adam Driver. That's his name. There's a scene where he's talking to the lawyer and they're starting to get divorces. And he's like, no, I just want to ask for a reasonable thing in the settlement. Like we're not trying to get aggressive. And he's like, no, you don't understand. If your wife is working with these lawyers over here, they're going to go start off with this demands this far out in crazy land. And if you start with what's perfectly center and reasonable, you guys meet in the middle somewhere in crazy land. And I think that the error and the risk of just bland conservatism without really challenging these ideas early on and consistently is that even those of us who consider ourselves centrists and kind of hip to what's going on, we do find ourselves like adopting these ideas, like earlier when we were the idea that we've been fed that the training is having us better able to serve marginalized populations. Those kind of ideas that should be challenged consistently. If we start with what's sane and reasonable and they go hyper crazy over here and we decide to if we allow them to pull us to meet in the middle, we end up with some pretty delusional takes as well. And I think that's been like one of the trends that people have been critical of in conservatism as a movement over the last, 40 years is it's just like, it ends up just being whatever liberalism was 20 years ago. And I think there's some validity in that. Is that we lose, like we can all sit in this circle and be like, yeah, those people over there are crazy and they're crazy about X, Y, and Z. And we're looking at the fringiest of the ideas that have made it to mainstream and we can criticize those. But like a lot of the presuppositions have been slid under the rug at this point and we end up adopting some of those in a way that's really unhelpful, I think.
Isn't that part of being trained to program the other guy? We've stopped listening. I mean, Michelle's your point, and I think what you're saying, Brant, is if we're not careful, you might be programming your client to think a certain way or say a certain thing because the training has been so skewed that we are now part of programming our clients to think whatever we think they should be thinking, and we don't even realize it.
Yeah, because we want to be so careful to make sure we don't minimize their experience.
Correct. So be careful. And that's
So
how this has been allowed to grow exponentially, is the trainings. And now we've had 10 years of this, and the training has accelerated every single year. So we're now on this trajectory of like, we're putting out therapists who have been programmed to do a certain thing, and it's just the continuance of the cult. And I think I know some of our clients are loving us because, oh my gosh, you've actually listened to me. You're the first therapist that have listened to me, and I'm not going anywhere. I'm thinking to myself, well, what happened before?
Yeah.
So we are the talk mechanism of the woke if we're not careful.
So I want to go in another direction again. I think in a lot of mainstream progressivism, there's this idea that everybody needs therapy, everybody can benefit from therapy. Amongst like a certain category of like upper middle class progressives, like having a therapist is kind of a source of social capital. And then on the right side of things, you've got like Abigail Schreier's Bad Therapy, which tells like a more cynical side of the story on therapy. And you got like Matt Walsh, who's like almost entirely against therapy, like it's all a crock, basically. And what I'm worried that we're setting up this dichotomy where it's like therapy is something progressives go to, and progressives go to therapy too much when they should really be doing other things in life. And therapy is not something for conservatives. That's a liberal field. And so conservatives are not going to therapy even when they should. Does that make sense?
Bingo. Yeah.
Well, I think, Ryan, it's kind of a marketing ploy to get the grad schools full because everybody's saying everybody needs therapy. All right. So I'll be, having, 400 clients a month. This is great. And the reality is that's not true. And what they're teaching in grad school is a very small percentage of the whole population of the United States. And I'm thinking to myself, gosh, if I'm being trained to serve 1% of the 3% of the, population because of the grad school curriculum, I'm leaving out 97% of the rest of the world. So I'm coming from that viewpoint of only serving the 3%, but it's going to bleed over into the 97%. Does that make sense? So this is how this whole sick thing goes. And also counselors are being told, and this is your point, Ryan, that it's a lifelong commitment. And I think counselors are being trained to just deal with the symptoms and not the root cause. When you look at it that way, it's the similar pattern of the allopathics, the MDs. Just give him a pill and he's going to be a patient for life. This is what counselors are being told. We're going to just reduce the symptoms, just take the pressure off. Everything's going to be fine. See you next week.
That's why I think CBT is like the only thing taught in grad schools. And CBT is trash. I will go on record and say I hate CBT with a burning passion of my soul. Right? Especially as an EMDR clinician. I hate it so much. And then, right, where I specialize in kids 8 and younger, absolutely not. They're not cognitive. That's, again, throw it in the trash. And with parents, too, who bring their own trauma. You can't just CBT triangle them out of, like, don't do that.
I love CBT, but I've had a lot of CBT haters on here. It's okay.
I'll switch you. It's okay.
Ryan, what you're talking about too, it's like an archetypal situation problem. You have, if you think about like what is a conservative, and this idea that we whatever have like this shared idea of like what that actually means. It's there's a more of an orientation towards boundaries. There's more of an orientation towards men especially having like independent provider roles, not showing a lot of weakness and less expressionism. That's also part of it. Whereas like the liberal uh, archetype is like expressive, more in touch with the feminized aspects of itself. Again, just talking about like men specifically, but um, yeah, the expressiveness, the communication, this idea of inner work. Like I agree with you. Like it belongs to both people. There's not a like political alignment around it, but there is something around like how these like archetypes get expressed. I think, if that makes sense. Like you brought up like Matt Walsh, for example. He's a pretty like archetypal conservative guy, and so
Yeah.
like those things that he's saying are expressing that, like this. He's very unexpressive, he's very like deadpan. Can you imagine him being like, "Hey, I made this painting," or something, or like,
Yeah.
that's why the Ben Shapiro thing where he's singing the opera is like so viral. I don't know if you guys see that, or like
I
from
haven't seen it.
whatever years ago. It's like him singing, like doing this goofy opera, and it's like a moment of he's usually very like archetypal.
Humanity.
Yeah, well, I think it's the word I use is the expressiveness, and there's a trap for folks in the conservative spheres to be like alienated from your inner expressiveness and from certain like inner realms around that. And it's like I think the thinking or the unconscious idea is like, well, if I like kind of keep things like neat and tidy, I can be like more conservative and traditional and like less expressions of weakness and all that. And then the liberals are more like, hey, freedom of expression, blah blah blah. And that lends itself to an affinity for their idea of therapy more. So I think it's like deeply woven into how we see like the archetypes of conservatism versus liberalism.
Michelle?
I'm not sure exactly how this ties into this yet, but I keep on thinking about some of what Kathleen said and how I don't know if you can have this conversation without talking about how trauma has been marketed.
Mm.
And if you're talking about addressing the symptoms and not the root, well, that's all you can do if trauma keeps on happening and if trauma's happening every day. But it's, I don't know how to say what I'm trying to say, but um if you have liberals that are like trauma happens every day and conservatives that are like um being called a name is not trauma.
Well, it
Somebody
is
like
now.
flipping you off at the grocery store is not
Right.
trauma.
Right.
Then yeah, they don't have trauma. Why would they go to therapy?
Mm.
Mm.
I think another thing to look here, kind of to build off of Brant, is like the masculine archetype versus the feminine archetype. I think like the idea of processing our feelings just because is like a more feminine way of like dealing relationally with stuff. Whereas like a lot of men are like why? What's the point? Like what goal am I moving towards? And like when I work
Yeah.
with my guys, I use a lot of sports analogies and war analogies, to like
Mhm.
get on their level of like this is the goal we're moving towards.
Good, Ryan, because the counseling field is trying to demasculine men. And so men aren't wired. I'm sorry, I'm just on a soapbox here, but I mean, men are not wired to be emotional. Women are. Men have certain traits and coping skills, and men need to be men. Women need to be women. We have done the opposite to both. Women have to be more like men, and men have to be more like women, and it is all messed up. If we could just get back to to normalize, the actual wonderful attributes of each sex. Yes, there's two. Then I think we'd be in a better place. But the counseling profession has definitely blown up masculinity and then some.
Well, you can do the test. I love this like little mind experiment of um if you took a group of people and put them out on a desert island where like survival and well, I'll put it this way, where comfort wasn't guaranteed, you would see specialization of roles based on whatever else it is. Like um my wife is pregnant currently. I don't know if I told you that, Ryan, but yay, right? And so I'm like extremely aware of some of the things that I can't do. And I'm pretty sure, even more aware of some of the things I can't do at all pretty soon for my family that like my wife is very gifted with. I think a long time ago, we got away from like honoring the feminine around some of these things. And so then what turned into the feminist movement in some ways was more about like fighting for this idea that women can do the things that men are good at just as good as men. And that's like such a hollow, weird movement, like stemming from a basic disrespect of like the sacred gifts of femininity. Where was it going with this? Yeah, like that. So if I take that lens, it's like that's where I think Matt Walsh actually goes and he's talking to like an African tribe about like in the what is a woman thing, and they're like what are you talking about, man? We have to like all be doing our job to survive. We do not have time for that bullshit. And it's like it's like that meme of like the good times make weak people kind of idea. It's like, yeah, we're getting all goofy because we're not having to provide in the same way. That having to provide and that like struggle like probably keeps some of those things a little more solid in our psyche. Ryan, I used to work as the director for this nonprofit that did like mentoring for young and rites of passage for teenage boys. And one of my big gripes, I do not believe in the model anymore. I was the director for whatever, I don't know, 3 years or something. I do not believe in the model. The model is largely around like just creating a group and having just a structure where we're like talking and like getting in, it's like free flow talking and like supporting or whatever. And then they would do these rites of passage things that were not really based on any sort of real achievement. And you'd have a 16-year-old there and a 12-year-old there going through the same rites of passage thing. It was like a naive boys version, like imagination of what like rites of passages is, right? Like back in the day, it's a very specific, personalized experience for maybe like a cohort of young men that are like going through at a specific point in development that requires immense accomplishment to get to the other side of. And this program that I was directing, the model is like, it just hyper affirming, like you're given like all this positive, effusive feedback. That is not rites of passage. That is crap. And I hate it. I called it like cheap feedback, cheap affirmations that these men would get so good at just being like so expressive and performative. And like, I would hear these men say these insane things. Like there was this kid who was definitely on the spectrum, and he was like challenging authority the whole time. And he was doing it in a toxic kind of like crappy way. And there was never any real boundaries held with him. And then at the end, they were like, "You've taught me so much about myself." And I'm like, shut up, dude. Like you're just training this kid to like think that like dickish way of acting is like okay. And you're training him that the healthy adults like just are permissive of it. It sucks. And I hate it. And then so where I'm at now, Ryan, is that like for men, maybe especially, I think women are wired a little bit differently, but like sports teams with a good coach who's able to be empathetic and like and read some of the emotional stuff, but where like it's a group of boys or men working together to try to like knock out an external goal. That's the framework that helps with masculine development, is like building something, working towards something, beating the other team, right? And then you get like this tactile feedback. Like we're wired in a way where that is how we like develop and level up. And the idea that just sitting in a circle and just like talking our ways into like our internal is somehow like working towards masculine development, I think is misguided.
I want to build off of kind of something Danielle talking about, like being a CBT hater. And I feel like, and I'd like to open this up to all of y'all, but specifically Danielle, I think of CBT and solution focused as like the very masculine therapies. Cause I'm thinking, what is my goal? And am I on a logical or illogical path to get to my goal? And some of my guys, we do a lot of CBT, DBT, and ACT, and they love having tangible tools they can hold on to and take with them. I see that as like more masculinized forms of therapy compared to like EFT or IFS. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Well, right, and I don't work with adult men. I have a man on my staff who I refer all of my men to, and he's my teen guy. Um, and he was doing couples for a little bit, and then when I work with a mom, usually if the parents are also wanting therapy, I'll send the dads to him. Um, because I I just don't think I think it's just a better fit, and then so I can understand that point of CBT being more logical. I know from his standpoint, he does a lot of the DBT, but he's also EMDR. Because EMDR, again, like I said earlier, it's the idea of the past experiences have influenced your current thought processes. And so I like to say CBT can be good preparation work, but EMDR says, why are you thinking that way? Why are you feeling that way? Why are you acting in that way? And then develops the history, and then you go through and reprocess that together so that we don't have the symptoms anymore, right? It's getting to the root. It's bottom up.
I love that. And something I'll add is one of the criticisms of CBT is it's shallow. And I think that's an accurate criticism. But I think the response that I would have is not all of your deep needs need to come from therapy. I think if you clear up some of these issues, some of these deeper needs can be met through friends, family. Does that make sense?
Yep. Right. Well, and I think part of our role is helping them find their internal and external resources. Right? I don't want a client that wants to just come and talk about their day. That is not the type of therapist I am. Like, find your people to process that with. And I also think we were talking about this, therapy is a hobby for some people. It's job security for therapists, right? If I never lose my client, I know I'll have a sturdy paycheck. Whereas, like, I had a handful of discharges in September, which is really great. And now I'm like, oh man, I have to make sure I get new clients right away, Yeah.
So I got one final question for everybody, and that is, if you're talking to like the public, the general public, what is one thing you think people should know about mental health that they don't or we're not talking enough about? Does that make sense?
Well, I think of the conservative Christian community, right? Especially like my church, because you definitely have people who don't believe in therapy. So I think I would want to almost talk to them and like, it's okay to come and get help. And we're looking at all the other factors, diet definitely with our kids, exercise, support systems, like we're just a tool, and it's okay, and it's not sinful, right? Um, don't I would recommend that they go see someone that is not gonna have different values than they. My very first therapist, I was an adult, they were like, I believe in all religions. And I was like, you're not gonna understand my worldview then at all. So finding a good match, but that it's not a forever thing. It's okay. It's okay. You can have Jesus and a therapist too.
I think just a recommendation is for people who might be looking to talk to somebody is find somebody who actually will listen to you. Actually shut up and be a good listener. There's something therapeutic about a client just purging, in your 10 by 10, and you've been very attentive. You've walked along in the story. You've sat back, and it's really incredible that they'll say, "You're the first person that's actually actively listened to me, and I feel so much better." And then we have the conversation of like, "Well, what is better for you now?" So find somebody who is extremely cognizant of active listening. And you won't know until you either read their website or you call them and have that conversation on the phone and just, just be FYI, we're not all the same.
I have just a few things. I think that the messaging should be different for hyper liberal people versus conservatives or whatever. Like if you're like the dad in like the Great Santini or whatever, then you're gonna need. Uh, I think the recommendation is like, yeah, like therapy can be very, very helpful. Still, this idea of like removing the stigma of it is important. I think that for a lot of folks on the left that are already like deeply saturated with the therapy culture, uh,
Mhm.
the messaging it probably should be on like there's certain lifestyle changes that like are you doing basic lifestyle changes? You're going to therapy twice a week. Okay, are you like working out? Are you what's your diet like? That I think is more helpful for actual mental health than just like defaulting showing up at your therapist's office sleep deprived, screen saturated, non flabby, non worked out, like all of these things that you can do. So I think kind of like per our conversation earlier, the left like dives into therapy. Therapy is like the answer. Therapy's the answer, and the right is like the lifestyle factors are all that matter, and like somewhere in the middle is probably a more healthy view on that. And then, um,
I think I think my brain naturally goes to like what would I say to liberals because that is the majority of the population available for me to work with in my area. And um something that I would say to them would be therapy is meant to be hard. If you're coming and it doesn't feel hard, we need to talk.
mm, yeah, I like that.
It shouldn't be overwhelming. It shouldn't be so hard that you're having panic attacks coming, but it is meant to be hard. And if it's not, we're doing something wrong.
That was pretty close to what I was gonna try to say, Michelle. That was beautiful. I was even
As I was listening to you, I was like, maybe we're saying the same thing. I don't know, but I'm going to say what I was going to say anyway.
no, it's beautiful. What I was gonna say is there's almost like a feeling I think that you should have in your body before a session if it's a good therapist. And to me, it's like a little uneasiness in your like stomach region where you're like, oh, like you're about to enter into a place where you're gonna be seen, which should be which will be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like if you're feeling lazy or apathetic before a therapy session, you're probably not working with the right therapist. Like there's like a bodily
Or you're
sensation.
not, or you're not investing the right things.
Mm.
Because
That-
sometimes I have clients that I know they come and they don't feel that uneasiness. I know what you're talking about, and I
Mhm.
think that's a really good way of putting it. Um, but if they're sometimes if they're not feeling it, it is are they shutting me down every time I'm trying to challenge?
Mhm.
You know? Yeah. I like that way of putting it though.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for a great panel and a wonderful conversation.